go. My name is Dr. MarkAlain, Dery, and I'm the Medical Director of Infectious Diseases and Chief Innovation Officer for Access Health Louisiana. I live in New Orleans, Louisiana, and I serve as co-chair for the ACOI Infectious Diseases Subspecialty Section. You see me do these updates now for over a year. Wow. In conjunction with the leadership of the ACOI, hello, leadership at ACOI, thank you for letting me do these. I hope these messages are helping you keep up with the latest on COVID-19. I know many of you are continuing to fight. Thank you for that. And for many, that effort is centered around convincing individuals to get vaccinated. Boy, oh boy, ain't that the truth. Wherever you are in this pandemic battle, I'd like to thank you on behalf of all of us who focus daily on infectious diseases, and certainly, again, on behalf of the ACOI. Hello, ACOI. So moving together with the ACOI, we will continue to share information as it becomes available, as well as some of the hopeful progress that we are seeing. All right, so let's talk about the World Health Assembly on preventing another global pandemic. That seems like a reasonable thing. Right now, as I speak to you from Podcast Central in my beautiful home in New Orleans, Louisiana, the World Health Assembly is meeting in Geneva. Well, actually, it's a virtual meeting to discuss what else? The pandemic. The World Health Assembly is the WHO's highest decision-making body with delegates from around the world. This session is being held now through June 1st, with a worldwide total of COVID-19 cases topping 162 million, with 3.3 million deaths. We know those are not accurate numbers. They are likely gross underestimations. But the topic of COVID-19 and how to prevent another pandemic is naturally on the top of their minds. So what are the lessons learned from this massive health crisis that we as a medical community can take to prevent another? First, it should be no surprise that the countries suffering the most are the ones that are already vulnerable. The ones that are exposed to disease have inadequate health care access to begin with and are most likely to experience adverse consequences as a result of containing the pandemic. Let's be very clear. In case that your head went to somewhere like in the Southern Hemisphere or what have you, we here in the U.S., the worst cases, most deaths. So let's just be very clear about that. Already vulnerable. Inadequate health care to begin with. All right, anyway. Secondly, we have seen over 75% of the doses of the vaccine being administered in only 10 countries. My goodness. The lowest income countries have administered less than 0.5% of the global doses. The Assembly is meeting to discuss health-related sustainable development goals and working on getting 1 billion people universal health coverage, with 1 billion people better protected from health emergencies and 1 billion people enjoying their better health. Remember, there's 7.6 billion people on the globe. So how are they going to do that? The Independent Panel for Pandemic Preparedness and Response, known as the IPPPR, presented to the Assembly its assessment, which basically said that the worldwide response to the pandemic was a failure. That's good. And that bold reforms are needed to both end this pandemic and to prevent the next one. Good. I like it. That's strong talk. Second, the biggest criticisms were centered around the lack of implementing the pandemic preparedness recommendations that were suggested after the 2009 H1N1 influenza pandemic over a decade ago. Wait a second. Are you telling me that there was actually instructions on the book on how to do this and they weren't followed? I'm shocked. Great. Seriously. No, it's making a joke about it and being completely facetious, because how else do you manage that? We knew this was coming. We had instructions on the book. We ignored it. Now, the problem combined with denial and delays from populist and science-denying world leaders created issues with miscommunication, i.e. misinformation, i.e. lies, complacency, and inaction. So, what do we do now? Increase vaccination rates. The IPPR is urging robust and sustained funding from the World Health Organization's access to COVID-19 technologies called the ACT, with monies coming from high-income countries to the total of $19 billion. Those same countries are being asked to provide vaccines to the countries that aren't getting it to make sure that the highest-risk populations are getting vaccinated as soon as possible. Now, while this is great news, In the U.S., the FDA authorized Pfizer vaccines for low-risk 12 to 15-year-old adolescents, and the IPPPR sees it as a clear affront to the global health and injustice when high-risk populations around the world can't get the vaccine. Another recommendation is maximizing vaccine production and equitable access to vaccines by stabilizing agreements for voluntary licensing and technology transfers for vaccines, along with funding to help establish regional manufacturing to improve production and distribution. In addition, actions need to be taken to ensure that the economic costs of COVID-19 will never, ever, ever be repeated. Basically, it will take a more empowered World Health Organization, sincere commitments from countries around the globe for better pandemic preparedness and response, and assuredness of equitable access to treatments and prevention. However, none of this is possible without increased funding for the WHO. Plus, the WHO must be better distanced from politics. Hey-ho, yes, indeed. And there needs to be more willingness to call out member countries who are not meeting their obligations. Yes, indeed. I could imagine, I know one country that should have been called out, whose letters start with a U and then second word is S. Right, that's right, U.S., us. The IPPR is also calling on the creation of a pandemic treaty of sorts to hold each other accountable and in compliance. How awesome is that, okay? Now, a huge recommendation from the IPPPR is that the recommendation to engage local communities to promote pandemic literacy and to better understand health communications. Health communications, I love health communications, and to work directly with marginalized populations on risk communication policies. How much is this awesome? This is so cool. Please, let's make this happen. Right now, vaccine hesitancy is very scary, and it's a dangerous global phenomenon. Is it ever? We talk about that on this video blog or this vlog all the time. Because get this, a majority of adults in 20 countries and in 117 country survey said they are not willing to be vaccinated. Public health requires bold action, planning, cooperation, and funding. I hope that we could get beyond this current pandemic by taking on the IPPPR's recommendation. That is the only way to assure that we will be able to prevent another. Listen, yes, indeed. That's exactly what we need to do. And listen, let me just be very, very clear here. The issue here was we knew this was coming. People like myself had been calling for it a long time. There is just, when you add politics, sorry, but when you add politics, no, sorry, not sorry, but when you add politics to a pandemic situation, when you put profits before people, when we put capital before people, people are going to die. And that's just the sad reality of the situation. And I just summarized up here what is a page and a half of brilliant writing. Thank you, Gina. And so we need to recognize that at this time, it's time for us to start putting people in front of profits, and we need to start recognizing that we need to take care of one another as human beings, not only here in the U.S. but around the world globally, and by allowing us to distribute massive amounts of vaccinations to the globe is really, at this point, the only way that we can do that. And the fact that President Biden is agreeing to a TRIPS waiver is important so that the intellectual property for those vaccines, which, by the way, you and I paid for as taxpayers because that was developed at the NIH for mRNA vaccines, will be rapidly deployed, and so that manufacturers in Brazil and India can start making that vaccine. Okay, speaking of vaccines, we all know that India has been facing a huge COVID surge. Oh, it's been heartbreaking to read those stories with big consequences to their population. Now, sadly, they've been experiencing care shortages that have left people without hope for treatment, and many have sadly died. The variant has been a subject of recent studies to help understand the effectiveness of our vaccines against the variant found in India. England's Public Health Authority found that 2 doses of the Pfizer vaccine was actually 88% 88% effective at preventing symptomatic COVID-19 of the B1617 variant. This is the name of the variant that emerged out of India. Now, the AstraZeneca vaccine was found to be 60% effective, and a single dose of either provided some protection. The study indicated around 33% effectiveness. So this is an important study because it is the first to look at the effectiveness of the vaccines against the variants. This truly proves that 2 doses are necessary for a high level of protection, especially against the variants. Now, while AstraZeneca's numbers appear much lower than the Pfizer vaccine, it is important to remember that this vaccine was mostly given to older individuals who naturally tend to have weaker immune systems. More interesting vaccine news coming out of the UK is that they may be possible that protein-based vaccines have several advantages over the mRNA-based vaccines. And it looks like a team from the University of Liverpool and the MRC Laboratory of Molecular Biology in Cambridge created an approach that may turn into a vaccine option that may be easier to produce and offer better protection. Yes, so we may be getting some new vaccine technology. The researchers have shown that a ferritin-like protein coupled with different antigens from the SARS-CoV-2 virus formed extremely stable vaccine nanoparticles that completely protected mice from SARS-CoV-2 associated pneumonia and disease after just a single immunization. Having a single dose would certainly help people get protection since many fall off and fail to get that second dose. In fact, in the U.S., it's estimated that about 5 million people, or 8% of the population, are failing to get their second doses. And we just discussed having a second dose provides significantly more protection compared with the 2-dose regimen. A single shot triggers a weaker immune response and may leave recipients with more susceptible, recipients more susceptible to dangerous viral variants. Wow. Okay, another vaccine update that I alluded to earlier is that the recent announcement from that the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine is safe and effective for adolescents ages 12 to 17. The findings were similar to the immune response in adults, and a surprisingly good development is that the vaccine was 93% effective after 1 dose at preventing mild cases of COVID-19. Side effects were about the same as adults, finding headache, fatigue, muscle pain, and chills after the second dose were as well as pain at the injection site. Now, I want to end this vaccine segment by calling out Massachusetts. That state is on track to reach its goal of 4.1 million of its residents vaccinated by the first week of June. Good work, Massachusetts. Most of those who completed a Boston survey agreed that the governor should lift mask-wearing restrictions around Memorial Day. About 1/3 said it's too soon. Some of the survey takers who voted yes to lift restrictions are vaccinated but believe it's still important to wear masks in public places. Regardless, Massachusetts is a leader in the country for vaccination rates, and we just want to tip our hats to them. Bravo. So stay on the lookout for our regular updates, and to read more from the sources used in this report, go to acoi.org/COVID-19. Together with the ACOI, thank you, ACOI, we'll help you have the latest information to help you respond to your patients and stay on top of the crisis. And please feel free to reach out to me at madery@mac.com. Please stay safe. We can do this together.